Amelia, I offer you my heart.
Amelia Ashford signed the divorce papers with the same steady hand she had used exactly 1 year earlier when she signed the marriage contract. The ballroom of Ashford Manor was unusually quiet. Only a handful of witnesses remained after the solicitor finished reading the final clause. And no one dared interrupt the silence that settled between the Duke and Duchess. A marriage that had begun as a carefully negotiated agreement was ending exactly as both parties had promised. Without arguments, resentment, or dramatic farewells. Nathaniel Ashford accepted the signed document, folded it neatly, and placed it inside a leather portfolio. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable, as though the end of their marriage was nothing more than another legal matter requiring his signature. "I hope," he said gently, meeting Amelia's eyes for only a brief moment, "that one day you find the happiness this contract could never give you." Amelia smiled with remarkable composure. "So do I, Your Grace." She removed the wedding ring from her finger and placed it beside the contract. There was no hesitation in her movement, yet something inside Nathaniel tightened as the gold band touched the polished surface. He could not explain why that simple sound lingered in his mind long after Amelia had quietly walked out of the room. 3 weeks later, London gave him the answer he had never wanted. The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace glittered beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers as the season's most influential families gathered for the Queen's spring reception. Music filled the hall, elegant conversations drifted through the crowd, and every noble household seemed determined to make itself noticed. Nathaniel noticed only one person, Amelia. She stood near the terrace doors wearing a pale blue evening gown that caught the candlelight like the first light of dawn. There was nothing extravagant about her appearance, yet she possessed the effortless grace that had always made people lower their voices when she entered a room. For the first time since their separation, she looked peaceful. Nathaniel had barely taken a step toward her when another man reached her first. Duke William Harrington. Young. Respected. Unmarried. The sort of gentleman every mother in England hoped would notice her daughter. Nathaniel watched William bow before Amelia with genuine admiration shining in his eyes. A few quiet words passed between them before William slowly lowered himself onto one knee. The music stopped. Conversations faded. Every gaze in the ballroom turned toward them. William opened a small velvet box, revealing a diamond ring that sparkled beneath the chandeliers. "Lady Amelia," he said clearly enough for the surrounding guests to hear, "would you honor me by becoming my Duchess?" Nathaniel stood perfectly still. For one unbearable moment, he forgot where he was. He forgot the musicians. He forgot the guests. He forgot every promise he had ever made. All he could see was the woman he had willingly let walk away 1 year earlier. Nathaniel had believed he was making the most sensible decision of his life. His late grandfather's will contained a single condition. To inherit Ashford Manor and the estates supporting more than 2,000 tenants, he had to marry before his 36th birthday and remain legally married for 1 full year. Nathaniel had no interest in a romantic marriage. He had spent too many years watching noble families destroy themselves over jealousy, betrayal, and impossible expectations. Love, in his experience, complicated every decision it touched. Marriage, however, could be negotiated. Amelia Hartwell entered his life at precisely the right moment. Her father's estate stood on the edge of financial collapse after several failed harvests. Selling the family home would save creditors but leave generations of Hartwells without the land that carried their name. She needed security, Nathaniel needed a wife. Neither of them needed love. At least, that was what they both believed. Their first meeting lasted less than an hour. There were no flowers. No declarations. No stolen glances across a drawing room. Only 2 intelligent adults discussing terms with complete honesty. Nathaniel slid the draft contract across the table. Amelia read each page without interruption. She occasionally underlined a sentence with the tip of her glove, then continued reading until she reached the final page. "There are 12 clauses," she observed quietly. "I believe clarity prevents future disappointment." A faint smile touched Amelia's lips. "Then I suppose disappointment has visited many marriages before ours." Nathaniel allowed himself the smallest smile. "I imagine it has." She continued reading until her eyes settled upon 2 particular clauses. Clause 1. Neither party shall expect love, jealousy, or marital affection. Several lines below, Clause 12. When this agreement expires, neither party shall ask the other to stay. Amelia read both clauses twice before slowly closing the document. I think, she said with surprising calmness, the first clause will be the easiest one for us to keep. Nathaniel nodded in agreement. So do I. Neither of them realized they had just spoken the greatest mistake of their lives. They signed the contract that afternoon. Not because they had fallen in love, but because they believed love would never become part of the agreement. Life inside Ashford Manor quickly settled into a comfortable routine. Nathaniel proved exactly as dependable as Amelia expected. He treated her with unfailing respect, never raised his voice, and never made her feel unwelcome within the home that now belonged to both of them. They shared breakfast every morning, attended dinners together, greeted tenants side by side, and fulfilled every public duty expected of a duke and duchess. To everyone around them, theirs appeared to be an unusually successful marriage. Only Amelia knew what happened after the guests left. Nathaniel would politely wish her a pleasant evening before retiring to his own bedroom. Not once did he cross the hallway separating them. Not once did he break a single clause of the contract. Every night before extinguishing her bedside candle, Amelia reached for the small calendar resting inside her dressing table drawer. She drew one careful line through the first date. Then she closed the drawer without allowing herself to wonder whether anyone else was counting. Because if Nathaniel remembered the contract at all, he was counting too. 364 days remaining. 3 months passed so quietly that even the servants began to believe the Duke and Duchess had settled into a happy marriage. Nathaniel rarely questioned that impression. Every morning, Amelia joined him for breakfast before he left to inspect the estate. Every evening, she welcomed him home with the same gentle smile, asking about the tenants, the harvest, or the repairs. Their conversations were never intimate, yet they became as dependable as the sunrise, and before long, Nathaniel found himself arranging his days around them without ever admitting that he had done so. He told himself it was simply the comfort of routine. Nothing more. Nothing that could ever violate Clause 1. The change announced itself on a morning so ordinary that Nathaniel almost missed it. His coffee had already grown cold by the time he looked toward the empty chair across the breakfast table for the third time. "Has Her Grace already eaten?" he asked at last. The butler inclined his head politely. "The Duchess left before dawn, Your Grace. Mrs. Whitmore's youngest grandson has taken ill. Her Grace wished to deliver medicine personally." Nathaniel gave a quiet nod. "Very well." He unfolded the newspaper resting beside his plate. 10 minutes later, he realized he had been staring at the same paragraph without reading a single word. The room was not truly empty, yet somehow, it felt that way. Amelia never tried to transform Ashford Manor. She simply cared for it as though she already belonged there. The library became brighter after she persuaded the housekeeper to open the heavy curtains each afternoon. Fresh flowers appeared on windowsills that had remained bare for years, and laughter occasionally echoed through the gardens whenever village children visited to help feed the orphaned lambs rescued from neighboring farms. Nathaniel noticed those changes the way people notice spring. Not all at once. Only after winter had quietly disappeared. London's social season arrived with endless invitations. Charity galas, garden parties, concerts, art exhibitions. Ashford Manor attended them all. It was during one of those evenings that Nathaniel met Duke William Harrington. William possessed the effortless confidence of a man entirely comfortable with himself. He was thoughtful without seeming rehearsed, generous without seeking praise, and remarkably attentive whenever someone else was speaking. Nathaniel respected him immediately. He regretted it just as quickly. Because William admired Amelia, their first conversation lasted only a few minutes. Amelia paused before an ancient Latin manuscript displayed inside a museum exhibition. The translator misunderstood this passage, she murmured almost to herself. William smiled. "So I thought." He pointed toward a single sentence near the bottom of the page. "The original doesn't describe loyalty, it describes forgiveness." Amelia looked at him with delighted surprise. "You noticed?" Nathaniel watched them from across the gallery. Neither of them flirted. Neither behaved improperly. They simply shared a conversation that neither wished to end too quickly. For reasons Nathaniel could not explain, he found himself walking toward them. William greeted him warmly. "Your Grace, you are fortunate indeed. I've rarely met anyone who enjoys forgotten languages quite as much as your wife." Nathaniel answered with perfect courtesy. "Lady Amelia has many remarkable talents." The words sounded sincere. Yet something inside him tightened when William continued speaking with her after he walked away. Days later, another invitation brought them together again. Rain had fallen steadily throughout the afternoon, leaving the stone steps outside St. James's Cathedral dangerously slick. Nathaniel had already begun descending when he heard Amelia hesitate behind him. He turned instinctively. For one brief second, he intended to go back. William reached her first. "May I?" He offered his hand. Amelia accepted with a grateful smile. Nathaniel stopped where he was. Only 3 steps separated him from his wife. 3 simple steps. His fingers tightened around his gloves. Then another thought interrupted him. Clause 1. Neither party shall expect love, jealousy, or marital affection. He had written those words himself. Slowly, he released his grip. When Amelia reached the carriage, he merely asked whether she had slipped. "No." She smiled. His Grace was kind enough to help. Nathaniel nodded. "I'm glad." It was the correct answer. The following week, Amelia mentioned during dinner that she had spent years searching for a particular first edition of Persuasion without ever finding a copy in good condition. She spoke only once about it. Nathaniel remembered every word. 2 days later, while attending estate business in London, he passed a small bookshop near Piccadilly. Inside the front display sat the very edition Amelia had described. He picked it up. The elderly bookseller wrapped it carefully in brown paper. "A gift for your wife, Your Grace." Nathaniel looked at the parcel for several silent moments. Then his eyes drifted toward the wedding ring resting against his glove. A husband who had promised never to encourage affection had no business offering sentimental gifts. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I won't be needing it after all." He left the shop empty-handed. 3 days later, a parcel arrived at Ashford Manor. Amelia opened it in the library. A small handwritten note accompanied it. "Every beloved story deserves to be read again. William Harrington." It was incredibly thoughtful of him. Nathaniel forced himself to smile back. It certainly was. No one noticed how quickly he returned to his study afterward. Summer slowly gave way to early autumn. The calendar inside Amelia's dressing table continued its quiet countdown. 90 days. 60. 30. Every evening she crossed off another square with the same careful handwriting. Nathaniel began noticing the sound of her pencil long before he realized he had been listening for it. One evening he happened to pass her room just as she closed the little calendar. His eyes fell upon the remaining pages. "So few?" he asked before he could stop himself. Amelia looked down at the calendar resting gently between her hands. "I made a promise." Her smile remained as graceful as ever. Yet sadness lingered quietly behind it. "And I intend to keep every day of it." Nathaniel wanted to tell her the manor no longer felt the same whenever she left for even a single afternoon. He wanted to confess that breakfast tasted strangely empty without her across the table. He wanted to ask whether she had ever imagined staying after the contract expired. Instead, his thoughts returned once more to the final clause. When this agreement expires, neither party shall ask the other to stay. He stepped aside to let her pass. "Good night, Amelia." She offered him the same gentle smile that had greeted him every evening for almost a year. "Good night, Nathaniel." She walked back to her room. A few moments later, another date disappeared beneath her pencil. Only 7 remained. Nathaniel stood alone in the dim hallway, listening to the faint scratch of graphite against paper until the sound finally stopped. For the first time since writing the marriage contract, he wished he had never written it at all. 7 days remained. The final week arrived with unsettling quiet. Ashford Manor continued to function exactly as it always had. Breakfast appeared at the same hour. Estate reports waited on Nathaniel's desk each morning. Servants polished the silver, tended the fireplaces, and prepared the drawing room for autumn guests. Nothing seemed different, except that Nathaniel found himself measuring every ordinary moment against an invisible clock. 7 days. Then 6. Then 5. Each evening, as he crossed the upper corridor on his way to his study, he heard the same faint sound drifting from Amelia's room, the soft scratch of a pencil crossing another square on her calendar. He never knocked. He never asked her to stop. Instead, he continued walking, convincing himself that honoring the agreement was the last kindness he could still offer her. On the fourth evening before the contract expired, Nathaniel returned from London later than expected. The house was unusually quiet. Passing the music room, he noticed the door standing slightly open. Amelia sat alone at the piano, her fingers moving gently across the keys as the melody floated through the empty corridor. It was neither joyful nor sorrowful, only wistful enough to make the silence between each note feel heavier than the music itself. Nathaniel remained outside the doorway, unseen. He had forgotten that Amelia played the piano. Or perhaps he had simply never taken the time to listen. The piece ended almost as softly as it had begun. Amelia closed the piano lid and whispered to herself, "I'll miss this room." Nathaniel's breath caught. Not our home. Not our life. Only this room. As though she had already accepted that nothing else belonged to her. Clause 12 echoed through his mind. When this agreement expires, neither party shall ask the other to stay. He turned away before she ever knew he had been there. The final morning arrived beneath a sky the color of cold silver. The solicitor reached Ashford Manor shortly after 10 o'clock, carrying a leather case containing every document required to dissolve the marriage exactly as the contract demanded. Nathaniel had reviewed those papers 3 separate times the previous evening. Each signature line rested precisely where it should. Every legal obligation had been fulfilled. Nothing remained except the final signature. Amelia entered the drawing room wearing the same quiet elegance she had carried throughout the past year. She greeted the solicitor warmly before taking her seat across from Nathaniel. No one spoke while the documents were arranged upon the table. The silence felt strangely familiar. It was the same silence that had lived between them for 12 months. Only now. There would be no tomorrow waiting on the other side of it. The solicitor cleared his throat. "Your Grace, Lady Amelia. As agreed within the original marriage contract, the 1-year term has now concluded. Upon signing these documents, both parties shall be released from all legal obligations." He slid the papers toward Amelia first. She lowered her eyes and carefully read every page. Nathaniel watched her fingertips move across the familiar sentences. She paused only once, at clause 12. Her fingers rested there for several seconds. Then she picked up the pen. Nathaniel's heart beat harder than it had during any political debate, any hunting expedition, or any battle he had ever faced within Parliament. He wanted to speak. Even a single sentence would have been enough. "You don't have to sign. We can discuss this. Stay." Any one of them. Instead, he remained silent. Amelia signed her name with graceful certainty. She placed the pen back onto the table. "I kept every promise," she said softly. Nathaniel could only nod. "So did I." Those 3 words sounded strangely empty. After the solicitor departed, neither of them moved immediately. Outside, a gentle autumn rain had begun falling across the gardens. Amelia slowly removed her wedding ring. She held it in her palm for a brief moment before placing it beside Nathaniel's hand. "There is one thing I'd like to thank you for." Nathaniel looked up. "You never made this marriage difficult." She smiled gently. "You treated me with kindness every single day." The words should have comforted him. Instead, they hurt more than anger ever could. "I hope," Amelia continued, "that Ashford Manor brings you every happiness you hoped this agreement would protect." Nathaniel opened his mouth. Nothing came. Because every sentence he wanted to say ended exactly the same way. "Stay." And clause 12 had already forbidden it. Amelia picked up the small leather calendar that had rested beside the window throughout the year. Nathaniel noticed her crossing away the final square. 365 days. Finished. She closed the calendar, "I suppose." She whispered almost to herself, "That's the last one." Then she walked toward the door. She never looked back. Nathaniel did. He watched until the door quietly closed behind her. The house became unbearably quiet. It was astonishing how quickly one person's absence could transform an entire manor. The second teacup disappeared from breakfast without anyone mentioning it. The fresh flowers in the drawing room gradually stopped appearing. The library curtains remained closed well into the afternoon because no one remembered Amelia's habit of opening them. Even the old gardener asked one morning, "Will Her Grace be returning soon?" Nathaniel answered without lifting his eyes from the estate ledger, "No." The old man simply nodded. "I thought the roses might disappoint her if she never saw them bloom." Nathaniel stopped writing. Those roses. She had planted them herself. He walked to the gardens that evening. For the first time, the bushes had begun producing delicate pale blossoms. And she wasn't there to see it. 3 weeks later, London's autumn charity gala gathered nearly every noble family beneath the magnificent glass ceiling of the Royal Conservatory. Nathaniel attended only because duty required it. He had spent the previous weeks convincing himself that life would eventually settle back into its old rhythm. It never had. Every room inside Ashford Manor still felt as though someone important had merely stepped outside and forgotten to return. Then he saw Amelia. She looked happier than he had expected. Not because she laughed loudly, but because she no longer carried the quiet sadness he had mistaken for contentment during their marriage. Nathaniel almost walked toward her. Before he could, another figure reached her side, William Harrington. Nathaniel remained where he stood. William spoke for several moments. Amelia listened carefully. Then William reached into his coat. Guests nearby gradually fell silent. Nathaniel felt his stomach tighten. William lowered himself onto one knee. He opened a velvet ring box. "Lady Amelia." His voice carried effortlessly through the suddenly silent ballroom. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Nathaniel forgot every clause he had ever written. For the first time in an entire year, he moved. The ballroom remained silent long after William Harrington had asked the question that no one expected to hear. Nathaniel stood frozen near the entrance, his gaze fixed on Amelia as if the rest of the room had disappeared. 3 weeks earlier, he had watched her leave Ashford Manor without asking her to stay. Now, another duke was offering her everything he had been too afraid to give. William noticed him first. Instead of looking irritated, he slowly closed the velvet ring box and stepped back with quiet dignity. "I believe Lady Amelia deserves a moment to make her own choice," he said calmly. His words left no room for pride or rivalry. They simply reminded Nathaniel of the one thing he had denied Amelia for an entire year. The right to choose. Nathaniel approached slowly until he stood before her. His voice was steady, but the regret behind it was impossible to hide. "May I speak with you just once?" Amelia studied his face for several long seconds before giving a small nod. Without another word, they walked together into the palace gardens, leaving the music and conversation behind. The evening air was cool, and rows of lanterns cast a soft golden light across the stone paths. It was strangely peaceful, yet neither of them could ignore the weight of everything that had happened since the day they signed the marriage contract. Nathaniel broke the silence first. "I spent months convincing myself that I was honoring our agreement," he said quietly. "I believed that keeping every clause made me an honorable man. I thought letting you leave without asking you to stay was the greatest respect I could show you." He lowered his eyes with a faint, bitter smile. "I finally understand that it wasn't honor at all. I was simply afraid to admit how much I loved you." Amelia listened without interrupting. She had imagined this conversation countless times during the past year, yet hearing those words now did not erase the memories that had come before. "You loved me," she said softly, "but you still handed me the divorce papers." Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment. "I know. You watched me walk through the front door for the last time. I know. You never asked me to stay." This time he could not answer. Every accusation was true, and no explanation could change what had already happened. After a long silence, Amelia reached into the small handbag she carried and removed the worn leather calendar Nathaniel had seen so many times on her bedside table. She placed it gently in his hands. "I want you to look at it now." He opened the first page. A single pencil mark crossed out the first day. He turned another page. Then another. Every evening. Every week. Every month. Marks continued without interruption until only one square remained untouched. Nathaniel stared at the final page, unable to look away. "You never crossed out the last day." A quiet tear slipped down Amelia's cheek. "Because I couldn't." She smiled sadly. "I wasn't counting the days until I could leave." Her voice trembled as she looked at the final empty square. I was counting the days hoping you would finally love me more than the contract before I reached the end. Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. 364 small pencil marks suddenly became 364 nights that Amelia had spent believing tomorrow might finally be different. Instead, he had remained silent every single time. Very carefully, Nathaniel reached inside his coat and unfolded the marriage contract he had carried with him since the day Amelia signed the divorce papers. The paper looked strangely insignificant now. Clause 1. Neither party shall expect love, jealousy, or marital affection. Clause 12. When this agreement expires, neither party shall ask the other to stay. For months, he had treated those words as if they were stronger than his own heart. Standing beside Amelia beneath the lanterns, he finally understood that he had written those rules to protect himself, not to protect either of them. He handed the document to her. If you still wish to leave, he said quietly, I won't stand in your way again. But this time, your decision won't be made because of words I wrote a year ago. It will be made because it's truly what you want. For the first time since their marriage began, the choice belonged entirely to Amelia. She looked from the contract to Nathaniel's face. Then she slowly tore the first page. The second. The third. Small pieces of paper drifted into the evening breeze before settling among the autumn leaves. I never wanted to escape our marriage, she whispered. I only wanted to know that I wasn't the only one fighting for it. Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes filled with tears he no longer tried to hide. You never were. He gently took her hands. Stay. Just one word. The one word that should have been spoken long before the contract ever reached its final page. A few steps away, William quietly watched the scene unfold before offering Amelia a warm smile. I believe you've already found your answer. Nathaniel met his eyes. I'm sorry, William shook his head. Don't apologize to me. He looked at Amelia with sincere respect before placing the unopened ring box back into his pocket. Take good care of the future you almost lost. With a courteous bow, he turned and walked back toward the palace, leaving them alone beneath the lanterns. Nathaniel looked down at the calendar once more. Taking the pencil tucked inside its cover, he smiled through tears and wrote two simple words inside the final empty square. Day 1. Amelia looked at him in surprise. What does it mean? It means our contract has ended. Our marriage begins today. Months later, the breakfast room at Ashford Manor was filled with warm spring sunlight. Fresh flowers rested on the table and beside Amelia's teacup lay a beautifully wrapped first edition of Persuasion, the book Nathaniel had once been too afraid to give her. As Amelia smiled, Nathaniel reached across the table and took her hand without hesitation. There was no contract waiting between them. No countdown hanging over their future. Only an ordinary morning shared by two people who had finally learned that love was never protected by silence but by choosing each other again every single day.